Today we get to learn how to play Robo Rally Transformers by Dan Blanchett and Renegade Game Studios. Hi, I'm Kevin Baker and you're watching Shangri-La, my YouTube channel for tabletop board games, birding, and other educational videos. Please like and subscribe. This video is not sponsored by the good folks at Renegade Games, but I've played thousands of hours of regular Robo Rally, and I just got Robo Rally Transformers and love it, and I think everybody should learn how to play. So here we go. Let's learn the rules. All versions of Robo Rally are races to checkpoint flags. You have to get to the first checkpoint flag, number 1, and then stop there at the end of one of the registers, and that counts as getting to the flag. And then you get to flag 2, then to flag 3, then to flag 4, then to flag 5, and then to flag 6. Most races only have 2 or 3 flags, but there's nothing to say you can't have 6 flags or even more if you're really crazy. The more flags that you have on the board to get to, the longer the game actually is. So the game says up to like 90 minutes, but I've had games with 12 flags that took several days, but that's just me. The manual comes with several recommended setups for different race courses, but you can create your own, and it's got guidelines in the manual for how to set up your own. But the general way is you have various checkpoints and you put energy out in various spots. They call it Energon in this version of Robo Rally, or Energon, depending on where you live. Okay, so in this version of Robo Rally, whenever you go over one of the Energon cubes, you don't even have to stop there. You can pick up the Energon cube and add it to your Energon. So that way, that gives you additional money to spend on various aspects of the game. Mostly it's for buying the upgrade cards. So at each of the different robots have their own either personal upgrades in blue that are different for each of the different Autobots or Decepticons. And then at the beginning of the game, every player gets one additional randomly drawn upgrade. Now these are in your library to choose from. The first thing you'll do in the game is an upgrade phase. So that's where you have the opportunity to pick one of your upgrades and purchase it. So you can go through and this one cost 4, this one cost 3, 2, and 3. So that would mean that, let's go Don't Blink. So let's put that one into play. That cost 4, so you go from the starting value of 5 down to 1. Then the rest of these you can put face down to the left of your player mat. You can have 4 permanent upgrades installed and 3 temporary upgrades installed at any one time. You can also spend 1 more during the upgrade phase to get a new upgrade to add to your collection. So then you take this and you put it in your library of potential upgrades. And everybody does this simultaneously. So Arky decides to buy style points for 3, puts that into play, pays the cost, and spends 1 more to get a new upgrade to look at and puts that in the pile of upgrades to get later. And then Dragstrip looks at his Decepticon upgrades and it's going to go with Pit Crew. So this one, when on a pit stop during the board element activation, take 1 additional action for a total of 3. You cannot repeat the same action all 3 times. So on pit stops, that's these spots here, When you stop on those spots, you can get either 2 energon or do 2 repairs. I'll show you what that looks like later. But that's going to be a good thing. We're going to get that. Paying 1 additional for a new upgrade card to look at is optional. The other thing you can do during an upgrade phase is just discard one of your upgrades in order to make room for a new one. The priority order is decided by the priority player token that will pass to the next player clockwise each turn. So starting with the first player, so Dragstrip is going to say, I'm going to start here. You can only start on one of these flag type starting places. Since the first stop is flag 1, that's a good starting place. And then we'll have Blur come over here and decide to start here. And Arky is going to start here. Okay, so that is picking your starting place. Each player has their own personal deck of cards that they shuffle and then they put on the draw spot. So I'll show you what the different cards are. You can choose to turn right. You can move forward 1, move forward 2. You can drift left, which is just shifting 1 spot to the left without changing facing. Drift left, move 2, move 1. You can also move forward 3. You can turn left. You can drift to the right. That's shifting 1 space to the right without changing facing. And another, you can also move back 1 space. There's a U-turn, so you turn 180 degrees. You can play a power up, so that would get you 1 energon cube. If you play an again after a register, it will repeat the prior register. So an again after a power up would get you a 2nd power up. If you play an again as in your first register, that would draw 1 random card off the top of your draw pile. Your checkpoint counter here starts at the start, and as you make it to each flag, you move it to 1, and then you move it to 2, to 3, to 4, to 5, to 6. And if you've made it to 6, and nobody's knocked you off the flag, then you're gonna win the game. Or if you just have a 3 flag game, you just have to get to 3. There is 1 player aid card that shows you the summary of all of the rules. So after you do the upgrade phase, then you're going to do a planning phase. That's where you take your cards and your planning cards and you deal yourself a hand of 9 of them and you program 5 of them into your various registers. And then there's going to be an activation phase where everybody turns over the first register, and in player order, starting with the priority player, you will all do your first register. And the order does matter because you could end up pushing each other around. And so that happens in the activation phase. Then after everybody has done their cards, then the board elements are going to happen. And then you have the end of the round to see how you made it to checkpoints and other elements. The opposite side of the player A card shows the different board elements. The first one are moving walkways. So these are like the conveyor belts in the previous version of Robo Rally. The unique thing about Transformers from the other Robo Rally is that each of your players has 2 different modes. You've got a bot mode here, then on the opposite side, it shows your alternate mode. So that's where you become a vehicle and can move around the board faster in some cases. And so when you're planning out your 5 registers, you can flip this over to whichever side you want at no cost. Once you get into the activation phase, where you're actually doing your registers, you can pay 1 Energon cube in order to flip this over. And it makes a difference based on the different board elements. So you can't go onto the moving walkways if you're currently in your alternate mode. You would get to a position where you were here, and if you tried to do a move 1 onto here, you would just bump into that moving walkway and just stop. So you would not be able to get on there. If there's another robot that is here and does a move 1, you can actually be pushed onto a moving walkway. And then once the board elements go, you will then go 1 space in that direction. But if Blur had another move 1, Blur would not be able to move onto this spot because Blur is still in the alternate mode. So you can change from your bot mode to your alternate mode while you're on moving walkways, but you can only be moved along by the moving walkway in alternate mode. You can't intentionally play a movement card in order to go to a spot that is on a moving walkway. If you did a move back card from here, you could move off of the moving walkway backwards. So a move card would work there. You could also drift to the left. So if you did a drift left, that would move you to here. Okay, now we also have pushers. So we have pushers in this game. So if Arky was over here, there are numbers on the pushers. This is a 1-3 pusher. This is an example of a 2-4 pusher. So that refers to the various registers here. So Arky is on a 1-3 pusher. So after everybody does their card in the register, if you're still sitting on that spot at the end of registers 1 or 3, it's going to push Arky 1 space away from the pusher, basically right into this fire pit. Fire pits are bad. Do not go into fire pits if you can possibly avoid them. Because when you first go into the fire pit, you take 1 damage. This is the damage pile. So you take a damage, just 1, and it's scrap. It goes into your hand. So you hold that. In the old version of Robo Rally, damage could get into your discard pile and then get shuffled into your draw deck. In this version of Robo Rally, at no time does damage ever get into the discard pile. Don't believe all of those horrible other tutorials that showed you damage going into the discard pile. That doesn't happen. So there are different kinds of damage that you can get. Most of them are scrap, but there's also ongoing damage. So this one, you would place this next to your upgrades, and you can't install new upgrades until you pay an Energon to discard this. So that would be ongoing. There are also, here's disarm. You can't fire for the remainder of the round. You've got instant ones. Uninstall 1 upgrade if you have 2 or more. So there's ongoing, instant, and there's a false start where you would move the priority token to the next player, then everybody else gets an Energon. Not nice. Energy leak is a nice one. So if you get this one, you drop 1 of your Energon, if you have any, and place that into the spot. You've got to move off that spot, and the next person to move back onto that spot or go over that spot could pick up that energy that you dropped. Here's a stasis lock. You can't convert for the remainder of the round unless you pay an energon. So essentially that's 2 energon to convert. As for converting, so that's flipping this from alternate mode to bot mode or bot mode to alternate mode. Now you can do that for free when you're programming your cards, but if it's during the activation phase when you're actually doing each of the registers, then you can pay 1 energon from here, if you have any, to flip that over because you need it for certain aspects of the board. So let's look at some more board elements. You have pit stops. So if Blur backs up onto a pit stop here, they look like that, you have your choice. You can get either 2 energon, or you can get 1 energon and heal a damage. So let's get rid of the damage. So that is the way you can get rid of damage. So you can get rid of 2 damage or get 2 energon or do 1 of each. Now the next board element let's look at is a jump. So let's come over here and look at jumps. So now jumps are interesting. So they are ramps. So if nobody is on the ramp, then they will block shooting. So they will block the robots shooting at each other from all sides. However, if there is a robot that is on the ramp, then they can shoot and they can get shot. So Dragstrip and Arky could shoot each other. Now, right now, Arky is in bot mode. So in bot mode, a ramp is just the same as any other flat spot. However, if Arky is in the alternate mode, then you can use the ramp to do jumps. So in this case, if Arky does a move 2, that would go forward 2 spaces. The distance that you jump is equal to how many spaces it took to get to the ramp. So if this would be 1, 2, then you would jump forward 1, 2 spaces, and then if it was an open space, you would stop there. If it's not an open space, it's actually a building, you'd then jump off the top of the building and land on the next open space. If Arky was to do that, go 1, 2, pushing Dragstrip into the fire pit, then Arky would jump over Dragstrip and then end up landing here. Now, when the Dragstrip goes into the fire pit, would immediately get 1 damage. So when Dragstrip went into the fire pit, so got the damage card, loses the cards out of register 5, and loses any remaining movement in the current register. So that's bad. Stay out of the fire pits. Now you can be pushed out of fire pits by another bot. If Arky did a move 2 from here, you'd go 1, 2, pushing Dragstrip out of the fire pit and jumping in herself, which would not be a smart thing to do, but that is what the board elements, how they would operate. Okay, so then what happens in this scenario is that Arky would then lose any remaining movement here, lose everything in the 5th register, and then hopefully be able to work their way back out again. But you can get stuck and then end up taking a lot of damage. Now, when you go off the board, This is a key difference between Robo Rally Transformers and Robo Rally Classic. So in this version, what happens is when you go off the board, you get two damage. So you get 2 damage. Okay, these are both happen to be instant. And so this one is slow your roll, push all unresolved card registers 1 space to the right. Okay, so you would do that, and then that would go away. There's also a false start, and we showed that the priority player go to the next player, and then everybody else gets an energon. And then that would go away. And then, so when you go off the board, you lose all of the cards in your next register. So if you went off the board on 1, you would lose everything in 2. Then come register 3, you would come back into the board, either back onto the original space where you left, or the next open space available. So in facing any direction you want. So you could come into the board over here if you wanted, facing that way. So you would not come onto the board in a space that already has a bot. Now there's also road spaces. So those are these spaces. So you can go faster if you're in your alternate mode while on a road space. The road spaces have directional arrows. So you want to be facing the direction of the arrows. If you are, that is a mandatory +1 to movement. So if Blur does a move forward of 3, that would actually be 4. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4. And that only works if you're in alternate mode, facing in the direction of the arrow. And then you get +1 to the movement. And if you were here doing that, some of that movement could be off of the roads. You can go 1, 2, 3, 4 all the way to here. Now there are corners and there are lots of turns. In Robo Rally Transformers, where there are turning icons, turns are optional, which is different than classic Robo Rally. So in this case, if you're here and you're facing in the direction of the arrow on the spot that you're on, and you do a move 3, since it's actually 4. So your first one is to go into the corner. So once you go to this spot right here, you have a choice. You can turn the 90 degrees in the direction of the arrow or not. So you could go 1, 2, 3, 4 to here, or you could turn and go 1, 2, 3, 4. So that gives some flexibility. Now, if you are here and you are first having Arky do, say if Arky was the priority player, and did a move 2. So if you get pushed over a corner or pushed onto a corner, say if you were right here, Arky did a move 2, 1, 2, you do not have the choice to turn. Turning, so just to reiterate, when you're on the roadway, you need to be in the alternate mode in order to have the opportunity to get the +1 mandatory to movement, or the choice when you're under your own power to turn in the corner road pieces. If you're in your bot mode, you do not have that option to make that turn. Now, if a bot in bot mode is on the road and plays a move 2, that is only moving forward 2 spaces to here. The turning is only for when you're in alternate mode. Otherwise, that has no effect while you're in bot mode. So if Blur was here in alternate mode and tries to go into a building, then Blur wouldn't go anywhere, because you can only enter a building when you're in your bot mode. So you can't even change into your alternate mode if you're inside a building. This is a building spot. That's a building spot. These are buildings. Now buildings have doorways. So that's a doorway. This one has 4 doors. It also has an internal doorway between those two. So when Blur is programming the cards, Blur would need to be in bot mode in order to go into the building. And then a move 1 would then go into the building. Now you can see that there's a turning icon there. So if you move yourself, not pushed, but if you move yourself onto one of those spots, you can then choose to move your robot towards another doorway. And if you are doing say you instead had a drift to the right. So if you did a drift right, you would then drift right to here, and then you could do a 180-degree turn and go towards a doorway. That's the same thing as if you had one here and you did a move back. So if you did a move back, you could then turn towards a doorway. So that is very interesting. That is completely different than normal, regular Robo Rally. And then, while inside the building, say you have one bot that's here, and normally, so that we'll put this one, so Arky is in bot mode and Blur is in bot mode. But Blur is inside the building and Arky is outside the building. So what happens here when it's time for shooting, Blur is protected by being inside the building. So another key difference between Transformers and regular Robo Rally is when you're in your bot mode, you can shoot either forward, right, or left. In regular Robo Rally, you can only shoot forward. If you're in your alternate mode, you can only shoot forward. But if Arky was in bot mode, you try to shoot to the left, but not be able to hit Blur because Blur is inside the building. But Blur is in bot mode, can shoot to the right and hit Arky for a damage. Energy leak. That means you lose 1 energy and you find another energy. In this case, I didn't have enough energy, so I scavenged some extra energy from King of Tokyo and dropped an energy on that spot. The game is supposed to come with 15 energy, but sometimes they only come with half that, rounded either way. And then you can just ask Renegade and they nicely sent me some extra energy cubes to bring it up to what the game was supposed to have. So thank you very much, Renegade Games, for being a stand-up company. Okay, so that's what happens when you have an energy leak. You would have to move off of that spot and then move back and then to pick up the energy and then get an energy. Okay, so we've shown that when you're in the building, you can shoot out, but you can't be shot when you're in there, unless both bots are inside, and then they can shoot each other. Isn't that nice? Okay, so then we have oil slicks. So let's take a look at what an oil slick does. One more example for Blur and a move 2 over an oil slick. So the counting would be 1, 2, and blur would stop right here. So that would be 1, 2. So the oil slick would have absolutely no effect because it does not come into play until the end of the movement. So it would be wrong to count it 1, slide to here, and then 2. That is not right. It is 1, 2, and then stop there. So it's not quite as fast if you actually follow the rules. So if you are, say, right here, now let's go right here and right here. So blur is right behind Archie. Blur is going to do a move 3. And the question is, where will blur end up? So that would be 1, 2, 3. So with oil slicks, you do your whole move, and then when you try to stop on a spot, if it's an oil slick, you continue to slide until you are either off of the oil slick or hit an obstacle that is not in the oil slick. So in here, if blur does a 3, that would push Archie 1, 2, 3, and then keep sliding. So then Archie is now off of the oil slick, and blur would stop right there. Then, so right now, that is on a very interesting spot. These are space portals. So once you get past all of the other board elements, if you are on a space bridge, that's what they actually call it, in the activation phase, then you would disappear from there, keeping the direction that you're facing, and show up on the space bridge of the same color. Now, if blur tries to go forward with a move 1, blur isn't going to go anywhere because oil slicks are -1 to movement to get started. So a move 1 is the same thing as going nowhere. Instead, you need a move 2 in order to move 1 space. And then, in this case, the other space bridge is occupied. So when blur went onto the space bridge and Archie already occupied the other space bridge, then blur would disappear from here and Archie would be pushed 1 space in the direction that blur was facing. Now, had blur been facing this way, then blur could not move onto the space bridge because there's an obstacle here preventing Archie from moving there. So that stops the space bridge from working. Now, space bridges also prevent lasers. So here, drag strip cannot shoot blur because there's a space bridge in the way. If blur was on top of the space bridge, then blur could get shot, which is very interesting. Now, if blur was to do a move 1 into the beam of the laser turret, when the board elements activate, blur would take 1 damage. Had drag strip also been in the laser turret, you can see how the emitter is not on this side, it's only on this side. Therefore, drag strip would take the damage and not blur, although they could shoot each other. So after the end of the activation phase, after everybody is done all 5 of the registers, with everybody doing register 1 first, then all the board elements, then everybody doing register 2, then all the board elements, then everybody does register 3, then all the board elements, everybody does register 4, then all the board member elements, then register 5, then all the board elements. Then you get to the end of the round. So in order to clean up, you take your cards that are in your registers and you put them in your discard pile. You can have extra cards that were in your hand. So in normal Robo Rally, they wouldn't be in your hand. You would put them into your discard pile after programming them. But here, after the planning phase, you would then have them in your hand still, because some of the upgrade cards use your additional cards for different things. Like there's a card that lets you discard turn cards in order to avoid getting shot. That's one of the upgrades. So at the end of the round, you keep your scrap in your hand, and then you discard the rest of your cards. And then you start over with a new upgrade phase, and then you do a planning phase. If you have 1 scrap in your hand, you deal yourself 1 less card. So instead of 9 cards, you'd only deal yourself 8 cards. Now you also had another damage, but this one says to put this one in your hand and do not discard at the end of the round to remove scrap. Okay, so you actually had 2 scrap. There are other types of damage that go to the end of the round that you'd be able to get rid of. So since you had 2 scrap, you only deal yourself 7 cards. So you'd take your deck, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and put the rest of those here. If you don't have enough cards in your deck, deal yourself as many cards as you do have, and then shuffle your discards and deal yourself the required cards to get up to 9 cards. It is possible to have more than 9 cards in your hand if you get shot a gazillion times and you accumulate scraps in the middle of the turn. But that doesn't happen very often. So Blur, being right here, is on one side of the ramp. So while in bot mode, doing a move 2 would climb right over the ramp to the other side. If Blur had been in alternate mode from here, then Blur would have bumped into the back side of the ramp and gone nowhere. From this position, Blur and Arky cannot shoot each other because the ramp is in the way. However, if Arky was standing on the ramp, then they can shoot each other. Now, if Blur was in the fire pit, Blur cannot be shot and cannot shoot out. There's another time when you can't shoot. Let's explain what happens when you have scrap cards. There are 2 ways to get rid of scrap cards. You can be on one of the pit stop places like there, and get rid of scrap, or you can program the scrap into one of your registers. If you do that, it's essentially like powering down for a register. In the old version of Robo Rally, you could power down and just be out for the whole round and then clear away lots of damage. But in here, what you do is you program scrap into your registers. So say you did that. So you would essentially be powered down for registers 2, 3, and 4. If you do that, you do not get to shoot while you are powered down, but you do get to collect energy when you're powered down. If you're on, say you were in bot mode and you were on the the moving walkway. If you're on the moving walkway while you're powered down, the walkway does move you along 1 spot each turn. And then 1 moves you here. There are no archive tokens like in the old version of Robo Rally, because in this version of Robo Rally, if you die jumping off the board, you come right back onto the board in the spot where you jumped off 2 registers later. If 2 of the bots are on either side of a grandstand, grandstands are immovable objects, and so you cannot shoot through the grandstands. You got your other bots that are in the grandstands watching and cheering you on, and you wouldn't want to hurt them. Now, if Blur had the temporary upgrade called Mine Layer, you would get 3 mines, and then you would follow the instructions so you can place a mine on an adjacent spot that is not a checkpoint. So drop 1 mine right behind me. That way if you chase me. Okay, so then what happens is you have Blur goes forward, and say Blur was in alternate mode, would then go in the direction of the arrow, so that would be 3. 1, doing the optional turn, 2, 3. Okay, now Arky has a move 2, but moves onto the mine. And what happens then is the mine blows up, Arky gets a damage, a flat tire. So now in alternate mode, the registers 4 and 5 have -1 movement, and you could pay an energon to get rid of that. So you hit the mine, and then you go backwards 1 spot after hitting the mine, and then the mine disappears. And then that ends your movement. So even though Arky only went 1 instead of 2, Arky does not go 1 more space forward. So that gets rid of any excess movement. And Blur has more mines, so it could drop another mine into an adjacent space. So now adjacent is orthogonally adjacent. So that would be here, 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 or here. Now, if there is a wall, so if you're here, these are walls. So if there's a wall there, that means that this spot here is not considered, this is not considered an adjacent spot because there's a wall in the way. Walls will block your laser shots, as will buildings and ramps and the space bridges. So, got to know what's adjacent and what's not. So in this scenario, let's assume that both Blur and Arky have already been to the first and second flags in order. And they're trying to get to the 3rd flag right there. So as the priority player, Arky moves forward 2. So moves onto here thinking, yay, made it to the flag. But not so fast. See, it's 2 because there's a wall there. So when Arky tried to push Blur backwards, Blur stopped at the wall and there wasn't any additional pushing. But then when it comes to Blur's first register, Blur then goes 2 and then goes to here, and Arky cannot be pushed into the stands, and so therefore Blur stops there on the register and actually does make it to checkpoint 3 and takes the lead. You can actually use original Robo Rally boards in a game of Robo Rally Transformers. Just you have to know that the conveyor belts are now moving walkways. So in order to come onto a conveyor belt, you've got to be in bot mode. And if you fall into a pit, it's considered the same as falling off the board, where you would take 2 damage. And if you're using an original board, any of the open spaces are considered roadway. So you would have the ability to be in alternate mode and go faster if you're on an open space. and chop shops and energy spaces would be considered the same as pit stops. And flamethrowers and pushers would work exactly as they do. And that's how you play Robo Rally Transformers. More than meets the eye by Renegade Games. Coming out to FlaMinGoCon on October 4th, 2025. And say, hey Kevin, let's play Robo Rally. And I'm gonna say yes. Okay. So I hope to see you all in person at the next FlaMinGoCon. Be well.